and good morning, everybody. I'm Bryn Skibo, Chair of the Colloquium Committee and Professor of English in the Arts and Humanities faculty, and I am delighted to welcome you to the Colloquium, the Arts and Humanities Public Lecture Series. Today we will hear from Professor Debra Pentecost. She's professor in the Media Studies Department, speaking on her topic of visual expressions of community, connections, and home. After her talk, we will hold a question and answer session and then enjoy some refreshments in the lobby. Before we begin, I'd like to give thanks to our generous and gracious hosts of the Snuneymuxw Nation, who share their traditional territory as well as their knowledge and guidance with the VIU community. I'm grateful that we can live, learn, and work here in this beautiful place together. I'd also like to give thanks to Dr. Catherine Rollwagon, Dean of the Arts and Humanities faculty. The faculty has supported the Colloquium series since 2009, permitting our professors and alumni to share our work with our colleagues and the greater Nanaimo public. So thank you, Dr. Rollwagon, and to the faculty. Finally, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Karen Skargis, who will introduce Professor Pentecost. And so please join me in welcoming Karen Skargis.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I, like Bryn, am delighted to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Debra Pentecost, who has been teaching in the Media Studies Department here at VIU since 2005. Debra's approach to media studies is informed by her academic background in communications and sociology, as well as her long-held interest in questions of social justice and the political and advocacy potential of storytelling through media. After completing her undergraduate education at Simon Fraser University, Debra went on to study sociology at York University, where she examined the representation of gender in TV-based toy advertisements aimed at children. This early academic work inspired a growing curiosity about visual media at the confluence of power and storytelling. Returning to Simon Fraser University to complete her PhD in communications, Debra turned her attention to the effective power of war photography. She began by examining the history of the camera at war and tracing the growth of photojournalism as a profession. She then conducted an audience reception study to learn about the ways audiences make sense of traumatic imagery. Of particular interest was distinguishing photographs that impacted the audience, that really drew in their attention, in contrast to those with little resonance or little impact. In the years since finishing her doctorate, Debra has maintained a keen interest in both research and in the relationship between audiences and representation. These interests shine through in her work here at VIU when I see the enthusiasm with which she approaches teaching courses like Film About Media and Public Relations Advocacy in the Media. I know that that excitement translates to her students because they mention things that they've learned in those courses mid-discussion in my courses all the time. Debra's enduring passion and curiosity about visual media inspired her to dedicate 15 years to serving as a member on the board of directors of the Doxa Documentary Film Festival, often moderating panels in the justice forum of the festival. In her time with Doxa, Debra learned a lot about the many innovative ways to storytell through the documentary or nonfiction form, and she brings what she's learned into her classroom by introducing students to some of the films that were played at the festival. For those of you who don't know, Debra is a member of a housing cooperative in Vancouver. In the fall of 2021, the co-op was made aware of Vancouver City Planning's intentions to tear down her housing cooperative and replace it with a high-rise complex. Faced with these challenging circumstances and potential catastrophe, Debra drew from her deep well of knowledge and considerable experience with mediated storytelling, research, and social justice to lead a community-based project documenting what it's like to live in the Creekview Housing Co-operative, to share their stories, and to convey their experiences of community. And so I think that I've yapped long enough now, and hopefully you guys are all as excited as I am to hear more about this amazing project. So with that, I give you Dr. Debra Pentecost.
Sorry, I had a candy just before I came up and it stuck in my throat. So not a good thing. I'm sitting there going, I have a piece of candy stuck in my throat. All right, So thank you, Karen, for your kind introduction. In addition to the land acknowledgement provided by Bryn, I'd like to acknowledge the unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory that the City of Vancouver now resides upon. My housing cooperative in the area of Granville Island and False Creek are located on these shared territories. I'd also like to extend a few thank yous. First, thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join me in this presentation. I truly appreciate you being here. A few of my family and friends have journeyed here today. My dad and his partner have come over from Vancouver, and my sister-in-law came down from Qualicum Beach. One of my oldest friends has also traveled from Denman Island. Thanks to fellow faculty members and students and those who may not be in either of those categories who've been curious enough to come out for the talk. And thank you to Bryn Skibo, chair of the Colloquium Committee, for their hard work in keeping the arts and humanities colloquium tradition thriving. I loved the inquisitive questions that Bryn asked for the accompanying CHLY radio interview that was conducted for this presentation. In terms of the research project itself, I'd like to acknowledge that the project was funded through an Asper Media Studies Endowment Award, and I want to thank Claire Grogan, then Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, for her ongoing support of my project through her time as Dean. I'd also like to give a shout out to Sarah Campbell, Financial Administrator and Research within the Office of Scholarship, Research, and Creative Activity. Sarah was immensely helpful in guiding me through the finicky financial aspects in the final months of my grant. Natalie Harwishkowicz brought her excellent graphic design expertise to crafting the beautiful photo book that you see the cover of here. And recent media studies graduate Mike Duddy utilized his awesome website skills in building the accompanying project website. I also want to draw attention to an earlier research project I did with the Nanaimo-based Seniors Connect in 2018-2019. Much of the heavy lifting in conceiving and conducting a photovoice project was carried out in that project, entitled Visual Expressions of Connection, Seniors Creative Show and Tell. And I want to also, of course, thank the members of my co-op and my co-op for partnering with this project. You'll soon hear their voices and see their work. So this year marks my 20th year as a faculty member within the Media Studies Department here at VIU. How time flies. Before I begin, I'd like to give a little bit of background as to why I remained living on the mainland, all the while commuting to VIU by ferry for 2 decades. I grew up in a suburb of Vancouver called Coquitlam. My parents sold the family home and moved to the newly developing neighborhood of False Creek South after I left home and was completing my undergraduate degree at SFU. I lived in Toronto during my master's and returned to Vancouver and to SFU for my PhD at the School of Communication. It was then that I met the person who would become my daughter's father in the earlier years of my PhD. Together, we applied for housing co-ops in the neighborhood of False Creek South and Kitsilano, neighborhoods we thought would be good to raise a child in. By this point, my parents had moved to Crescent Beach prior to settling in a condominium in the Kitsilano neighborhood. Fast forward a couple of years, and with my relationship now over, I was extraordinarily fortunate to be accepted into Creekview Housing Co-operative as a single mother, even though we had applied as a couple. I was living under the poverty line with a 2-year-old daughter, about to face years of strife, tension, and court trials against my daughter's father. My PhD did get completed, but it definitely took time. I'm forever grateful to the housing cooperative, to my parents, and to the additional forms of subsidy that no longer exist, or at least in the form that they did when I accessed them. These pillars of support were what helped me to get to where I am today. As I searched for a faculty appointment upon graduation, my daughter's father proclaimed that he would take me to court to prevent my taking an academic position outside of the Lower Mainland. As many know, academia functions upon uprooting recent PhD graduates and dislocating them away from communities they might have been fortunate enough to create during the years of their PhD. I held various sessional appointments in those early years and began a continuing sessional contract teaching in the Sociology department at the University of British Columbia. My father notified me of a posting he'd seen advertising a position available in media studies here. And in the fall of 2005, I began my permanent half-time position, grateful to Marshall Souls, then chair of media studies, and Marnie Stanley, both members of my hiring committee. However, I could not live on that half appointment, and with my daughter firmly embedded in school in Vancouver, I commuted to VIU these 20 years, teaching at 2 universities throughout most of those years. I've always been committed to teaching at VIU, however, and particularly media studies, and I never did choose to teach online, although obviously in the COVID years. This isn't to judge those who do offer online instruction, but it was merely to say that even though I lived away, I tried to not have that physical distance be an impediment to my position here. In very recent years, I was able to teach full-time in media studies. However, I did not receive my official appointment of full-time status until August of 2024 in my 18th year of teaching here. So before presenting my photovoice study to you, I'll first provide a little bit of background and context. I'll do a very brief overview of how the development of the housing co-op movement in Canada, and then talk a little bit about the history of the development of Falls Creek, which is now called Falls Creek South, including the massive transformation that the area underwent in the 1970s, prior to explaining the political situation many of us now face, given that we are either have expired or expiring land leases with the City of Vancouver. It will be of no surprise to anyone here that many forms of housing precarity exist and persist in both urban cities such as Nanaimo and Vancouver, and in rural regions as well. I used to do a news framing assignment with students, where I would be the one to compile a collection of news stories that students were then to make sense of. Almost 20 years ago, in 2007, a Vancouver Courier's year-end Newsmaker of the Year was entitled Homelessness. The Olympics was about to come to Vancouver, and there was a lot of attention on making homelessness disappear and on making homelessness a news story. But we can see from this small array of news headlines, both drawn from Nanaimo and from Vancouver, that issues related to the availability of housing and rental stock and the accessibility to affordable housing obviously remain and are acute, including the numbers of those deemed houseless increasing each year. Recently, the Nanaimo City Council joined other municipalities in British Columbia for calling for housing to be recognized as a human right. So briefly, some of you might not know about housing co-ops, so I'll give you a little brief background. The housing co-op movement actually began with the Antigonish movement in the 1930s in Nova Scotia, where groups got together and built houses. So it was really a building cooperative. In the 1930s and 1940s, student housing cooperatives also appeared, mostly from what I could put together, being built in Ontario, and these continued at universities in the 1960s and the 1970s. In 1966, the first, what would be called a housing cooperative, intended for a general public, opened in Winnipeg. But the big sort of push for housing co-ops really began in 1968. The Cooperative Housing Federation, CHF Canada, was formed as a joint initiative of the Canadian Labour Congress and the Cooperative Union of Canada, its purpose being to encourage the development of housing cooperatives. And what could be regarded now as the heyday of co-op development across Canada really began in the early 1970s and into the early 1990s. And we will know the early 1990s being the beginning of neoliberalism in its truest form. Integral to the construction of housing cooperatives were 3 successive federal government programs that were launched in these years. With an additional federal provincial housing program taking place in the provinces of BC, Ontario, and Quebec between the years of 1986 and 1993. Unfortunately, as was the case for many programs and services integral to Canada's post-World War II social welfare state, Canada's housing co-op sector suffered in the 1990s. Buildings that had been started were halted, and the era was marked by government austerity initiatives, programs, and cutbacks. At the end of the talk, I'll just briefly mention there's now a new housing starting in Toronto, and it seems that there's lots of discussion about the merits of co-ops once again. Some of you might not know what a housing co-op is, and so I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of how is it different from renting. So we definitely don't own, so how is it different from renting? And what are the merits for those that reside in housing co-ops? The mission statement for my housing co-op, which is in our laundry room, the sort of center of everything, reads as follows. Creekview Housing Co-operative provides affordable, nonprofit housing in a secure, healthy, sustainable, self-governing, and cooperative community for individuals and families. Housing cooperatives require members to consider themselves first and foremost as part of a collective, all working together to aid in the overall functioning of the entity. Those living in the co-op will never own their units. However, neither are they renters. At the outset, you purchase shares in the co-op, you're referred to as a member, and you pay a monthly housing charge. This housing charge is calculated at less than market, with increases occurring to cover the costs of the co-op. Further, depending on the type of co-op, an annual transfer of dollars was provided to co-ops from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, to be distributed amongst members showing financial need. Housing charges are set annually, and they're related to the number of bedrooms that you have, but the housing charge itself should not exceed 30% of your household income. Those unable to meet this amount for, say, a two-bedroom, based on this calculation, would receive the subsidy. So it's like a top-up. In those early years of my single parenthood, I was the grateful recipient of housing subsidy from my co-op. Co-op members are expected to volunteer, and this takes place either in a governance capacity, acting on the board of directors, or as a member of one of the many committees that aid in the smooth functioning of the building and its operations. Prospective members are interviewed with careful attention to assessing whether those applying understand and embrace the ethos of cooperative living. So I want to just give a bit of a background to the history and development of False Creek. For those of you who visited Granville Island or walked along the seawall between the Burrard and Cambie Street bridges might be surprised at the history of this area, in addition to the rather radical transformation in city zoning and political will that enabled this neighborhood to even be developed. Growing up in Vancouver and now living in False Creek, I was always aware of the toxicity of the water, but I didn't realize the extent, nor how quickly early European settlement and rapid industrialization had impacted, nor how quickly concerns were expressed at the unsightliness and the health and environmental impacts the rapid growth had created. Scouring the archives at the Vancouver Public Library was eye-opening, and I know that the warnings against swimming in the waters of False Creek persist to this day. Prior to the arrival of white settlers in the mid-1800s, Coast Salish settled on the coast and along the Fraser River in the area now deemed as Vancouver. Squamish were living at Sunnock at Kitts Point. And you can see there's a little bit of smoke. The bridge at the bottom, that's the Granville Street Bridge, the first one. And my co-op is going to be over just to the left of that white building there. The new Sunnock development that has gone in, that was a Squamish village, and so we can just see that up in the left corner of this slide. Today's Granville Island was a sandbar, a tidal mudflat, where a natural spring and a tidal fish trap were located. The Squamish were living in Stanley Park, where the last potlatch was celebrated in 1875. By 1886, False Creek was rapidly emerging as an industrial and commercial port. By 1900, although wood product manufacturing still dominated, this was joined by ironworks, machine shops, and manufacturing plants of other metal products. Granville Island itself was created from a dredging operation in 1916. And so we can see the bridge in the middle there, the Granville Street Bridge. And then a building that we're going to see in several photographs is then just to the right of that with all of the windows. And then we see the eastern side over at the edge there where Vulcan Iron Works was located. It didn't take long. By 1923, all of the industrial lots were occupied. And we can see there, 1924, and then later, 1926, how much development had taken place in those 10 years. By 1927, a report prepared by the City Planning Commission, attention was already given to the air, water, and visual pollution. So this is almost 100 years ago, associated with the industrial and residential growth in the False Creek Basin. And so a lot of the shots that I was looking at were from Cambie, the bottom of Cambie Street Bridge looking west. And so several profiled the Vancouver Lumber Company, which looks very imposing and has a tremendous amount of smoke coming out of it in every photo that I ever looked at. This is another showing sort of a more extensive view of the industry on the south side of False Creek. The waters of the creek smelled due to 16 outfalls dumping raw sewage from the surrounding residential areas. Detailing a lengthy list that included mention of decaying timber wharves, abandoned boat hulls and trestles, piles of manure, scrap wood, and other industrial refuse, along with emissions of smoke from 11 sawmills, in addition to those of other industries, a 1928 comprehensive plan for the City of Vancouver proclaimed, in capital letters, the False Creek Industrial District has been permitted to become an eyesore and a menace to health. Its regeneration is essential to normal civic development. Despite that, World War II happened and shipbuilding had also been taking place, and we can see here ships being built on the shores of the creek, and other kinds of industry in the other shot. 22 years later from the 1928 report, a 1950 newspaper advertisement for a mayoralty candidate for the upcoming election included, "False Creek is nothing more than a filthy ditch in the center of the city," and advocated filling in the waters of the creek entirely should he be elected. In the 1950s, the construction of what would be now the present Granville Street Bridge, which is under constant construction, I can tell you since I live under it, was being built. And here we see, roughly, I am located just behind these shots. And so we're going to see, if anybody's been to Kids Only Market, that's Kids Only Market there. And they're filling in and around the pillars of the bridge. In the 1960s, a series of land exchanges took place between major owners of land, including the significant Canadian Pacific Railway. Significantly, in 1968, the province of British Columbia gave its 85 acres of land, which we see here, on the south shore of False Creek to the city of Vancouver in a land exchange and some money. In the same year, Vancouver City Council voted to lift the industrial designation for False Creek. The city owns 80% of False Creek South land. The urban design that one now sees in False Creek South began in 1972, when Vancouver elected Mayor Art Phillips and other councillors from TEAM, the Electors Action Movement. A new emphasis was placed on planning policy in the inner city, with attention to a mix of land uses, social diversity, environmental values, and public housing. And it was all hotly debated at the time. TEAM championed reclamation of the south shore of False Creek, and a master plan was created, including, importantly, a mix of 1/3 non-market rental housing, 1/3 housing cooperatives, and 1/3 strata condominiums, all to be built on these city-owned industrial lands. Reflecting early 1970s values of a livable city and quality of life, the landscape setting was to resemble a garden city. And as Heritage Vancouver now proclaims, False Creek South is, quote, a widely admired success story, demonstrating the startling transformation of inner city industrial lands into a residential enclave designed for pedestrians and community, inclusive of all ages and incomes. Similarly, the False Creek South Community Association comments that, quote, the community vaulted Vancouver into global prominence with a pioneer of urban reclamation for livable community building. Towards these ends, urban design was intentionally created to foster interaction through various collective spaces, including a large waterfront park, courtyards, plazas, an elementary school, a community center, in addition to the seawall located along the edge of the waterfront. No matter the building, views to the mountains were to be preserved. That's kind of humorous these days, but nevertheless, through varied low-rise building heights built on the sloped land. The only taller buildings were located at the edges of bridges, which includes my own, which at that time was 8 stories, and it was thought to be crazy to be so tall. I wanted to show you this because it mirrored that 1983 shot. This is a park called Ron Basford Park. What's significant and why I've shown the slopes is it's said to be built on garbage. And so a bunch of the industrial garbage from False Creek, or from Granville Island, was all placed here, and then they made these tiered. I don't know if one day it's all going to somehow explode, but nevertheless, it's been a joy for many geese and people and kids rolling down those slopes for many years, and I don't have any idea what's underneath it. So Replan, an organization from the False Creek South Neighbourhood Association, has this as a map to show you the way that that area, what we're calling False Creek South, is. The legend at the bottom indicates which are strata, what are parks, which are co-ops. And you can see here, I'll just use my little handy pointer that I've been given. There's the bridge, and here's where I live in Creekview Co-op. And so any of those pink you can see are the co-ops. There's a marina here that is also a co-op, and then others are all land co-ops. And there are 6 land, and I think 1 as the one in the marina. I mentioned that 80% of False Creek, I think this zooms in, so I'll let it zoom. False Creek South is owned by the City of Vancouver. And this meant that each of the buildings created during this time, whether housing cooperatives, nonprofits, or strata, needed to enter into leases with the city. The leases ranged from 40 to 60 years. Now, I know that you can do the math. However, since the area was transformed from the late 1970s through to 1989, leases are now expiring, or have expired, as in the case of my building, or are coming up for renewal. 16 years ago, the False Creek South Neighbourhood Association created Replan, with focus to work with the City of Vancouver on developing new lease options to preserve the community beyond lease expiry. Replan states, we believe new leases are enablers for creating affordable housing options for all residents in co-ops, nonprofits, and stratas to remain in the community. We also support an increase in density while protecting the neighborhood's character to welcome others to this wonderful neighborhood. We love where we live. Now, over the many years of Replan's existence, I've heard many reports and updates at co-op general membership meetings regarding the status of talks with the city. Endless frustration was expressed at the lack of any type of serious engagement from the city. And sadly, one very committed co-op member, a long-standing representative on the False Creek South Neighbourhood Association, regretfully moved away from the co-op to one of the Gulf Islands, his partner greatly fearing our lease would not be renewed and that they would find themselves homeless, newly retired, and both battling forms of cancer. A nervousness became palpable in early 2021 when a survey was circulated by the city. It was live for a month, asking what should be done with False Creek South. And for those of us living there, went, what do you mean? There's already people living here. What do you mean, what should be done? What are your preferences? And so that was the first of what's going on after all these endless, will you renew our leases, please? And so here you see Shape Your City, opportunities for the future. Thanks for sharing your views. There's lots of politics that I won't get into. This was the result of things that had already been in the works for a couple of years by the time they asked anybody what they'd like to see there. But nevertheless, what happened is that they misquoted the sort of financial statistics for people that lived in False Creek South. And they also sort of overemphasized that all we were old and white and privileged. And so that set in place a whole bunch of op-eds and social media attacking people living in False Creek as being really just protecting their privilege. And so it was really quite awful. And so many were politically active, trying to kind of reach out to the city during the months that followed. In a really, really unusual move, in the October of 2021, then Mayor, running as an independent, I love renters, Kennedy Stewart, ended up releasing an op-ed to the then still existing Granville or Georgia Strait, where a lot of people read the Georgia Strait. Now it's a little tiny thing, but it was a really serious way of communicating with the population. So he released this opinion piece and ended out talking about, oh yeah, we're going to build more housing and we're going to protect where people are. And then the sort of planning report that had been outsourced was released a couple of days later. And that's when I found out, we thought for sure, because we were in an 8-story, we were safe. It's the other ones that are going to get demolished. And then it was ours, and then we all went, what? Our building's going to be demolished. And so it was really awful, obviously. And so there was tremendous outcry, and False Creek South Neighborhood Association replied. Here it is. If anybody's ever interested, you can find all of these. They ended up having a town hall where a huge number of individuals ended up speaking. And the council ended up not supporting this plan. An individual who had been part of this, Robert Renger, who is a development planner, as he says here, in the city of Vancouver, and the lead on the development of university up at SFU, ended up talking about how that area has been abused, but also further in the years that follow. So there you go. So that's the sort of setup. There's still uncertainty. The city ended out extending leases with strata. Obviously, they own their properties. But part of it was because the city would have to negotiate leases with every single owner, whereas co-ops is one. And they only gave them a 20-year extension. So although the following public outcry, this particular planning proposal was withdrawn, uncertainty remains for many living in the nonprofit housing cooperatives and strata that sit on land leased from the city of Vancouver. amidst extended and concerted efforts to negotiate in good faith with the Vancouver City Hall to extend affordable lease extensions, I witnessed the stress, fear, and grief that many in the neighborhood were and still are undergoing, not knowing what is to become of their home or the surrounding neighborhood. Aware of the special visioning that went into creating this unique mixed-income neighborhood, where all these people who are very committed have been working tirelessly, drafting really thoughtful and professional infill and densification plans that will preserve the special uniqueness. I thought, well, I can't do that. I'm not an architect and an urban planner and all these things, so what can I do? And so I embraced the potential of creating an alternative method of outreach, one that would allow my fellow co-op members from the housing co-op to come together in a collaborative, participatory, and creative action-based research project. The project is based on the qualitative methodology of photovoice, and I'll explain more what that meant for the participants. However, the point of utilizing such a method was to allow community perceptions of the merits of their home, their built and social communities, to be communicated in a manner that tugged at one's heartstrings, impacting at an emotional level, at the level of affect. Not only would the research process provide a sense of agency and creative opportunity for those that took part, but they'd also be active participants in creating evocative, affective, experientially based visual and written expression as they creatively conveyed their experiences of community and their connections with the people, the neighborhood, and the place they call home. My aim is that the project works in tandem with all of those thoughtful and intelligent and considered logic-based appeals that predominate in city presentations to City Hall and in media dissemination efforts. The research project sought to give expression to the following questions. How do housing cooperative members experience connection to the built and social environment of their home and of their neighborhood? And what are meaningful ways to represent concepts that include connection, community, integration, and participation through participatory media research? Participants were recruited, here's my recruitment poster, and the picture-taking part took place over the course of 4 sessions. Participants were tasked with taking photos led by questions and concepts pertinent to each week. I will explore these concepts more fully in a moment. Participants then completed a photograph reflection form intended to capture the reasoning and reflections behind each image, and in a subsequent session we would gather in our co-op's meeting room, taking part in sharing and talking about all of what had happened. Each participant presented their 2 photographs, explaining and storytelling, and then at the end of the session I would give them the guidelines for the following week's concepts. These photograph sharing and group reflection sessions were audio recorded, and then I was responsible to listen to the recordings, compare to what was written on their forms, and eventually arrive at a written narrative that would accompany each image. The drafts went back to the participants, and together we co-crafted the written descriptions that you will see and hear for photographs in the project. All photographs taken by participants were included in the final compilation, and I didn't edit or crop the photographs in any way from what had been submitted. In terms of dissemination, the first public outreach for the project included a photovoice exhibition, an open house that was held in the co-op. Interested project participants met over many sessions where we collectively planned the sizing and the layouts for the project's 80 images, and all of the accompanying written work descriptions that accompanied. And so here is a couple of snippets from the photovoice exhibition at the co-op. You can see how they were displayed around the room. And so following this, the photo book that you saw up there and an accompanying website have been created. And in the weeks to follow, I'm going to be giving copies of the book to select municipal, provincial, and federal politicians involved in housing. So these are the participants in the project, and I won't refer to them by name as I go through. So there were 4 weeks, and each of the weeks, these are some of the questions that those in the project had to photograph. So what does community or communities mean to you? What is your community or your communities? What does community inclusion look like? And what does it feel like? What emotions do you experience? What does community health look like? How does it feel? And what does well-being look like? How does it feel? So I'm not going to read all of, obviously it would take far too long. I'm giving you a sort of a snapshot of some of the images. I really loved this image. I love simple images that say so much. But here at the outset of Pay It Forward was, to me, a sense of community is helping one another. And she talked about coming to the co-op, meeting another family who had children, a son just a little bit younger than her too, and that they would obviously provide their clothing. The little sort of green and the package that's stuffed in the boots is food that her kids don't like. So it's like passed on, maybe some other kid will want to eat it. And so the paying it forward is very important for Danielle. This is the youngest participant in the project, and there's Kids Only Market once again. And I would love to have been able to have this individual read out. He does voice acting, and so he just reads them so well. But the thing about this was talking about as a child going and every week waiting to know what new Lego sets were in the windows and peering in, and just the enjoyment that he had. I've lived in the same place since before I was born, and when I was little, the kids' market was the most important spot in the world. In this photograph, this individual had moved up to the 7th floor, which is why it's a view from the top. This photograph signifies my community to me, my home. This has been my home for the last 28 years, a place where I feel safe, secure, and have a sense of belonging. She then talked about how proud she was to raise her daughter there. She thought she'd done well. She was a single mother in all of those years. And this is a shot of one of the areas of the co-op. I'm the chair of gardening. We've done lots of stuff, including the fruit and vegetables that you see. And what the point of this one, the person saw, here is where I want to be on the sign, and talked about how when she looks at this, what she sees also is that her husband built the pergola, and the gardening committee has planted all of the fruits and vegetables. And for me, she says, this means the sense of community where everyone can participate. Okay, this is not playing. The audio should be louder. I don't know where my audio person is. Oh, there you are. No, put it on the speaker. Oh, is it played through? Oops.
just need to restart this.
So go back.
Yep, go back one. And it should.
How's your kitchen doing? I have had many addresses in my life, moving streets, cities, countries, continents, mostly by choice, at times not. Somewhere along the way, the exhilaration of an ongoing adventure changed to a feeling of rootlessness and isolation. When there were challenges, my small family faced them alone. We did not have a community. Eventually, we moved to the co-op, built friendships, and now I realize that, while I'm still not certain whether I'm entirely from Vancouver, I am most definitely from the Creekview Co-op. This is my home. Recently, my family had the second leaky pipe incident in 6 months, which created chaos in our daily lives. Both times, the water running outside of its intended channel was discovered very late in the evening. Yet by the next morning, neighbors were caringly inviting details and offering help. Weeks after, I still get asked whether everything has been resolved. We had turmoil and crisis in our home, and there was a community that supported us. In the midst of an urban metropolis, I feel seen, known, buoyed. This is somewhere where I belong.
Together. Community building and growth can start with just one shared conversation. Starting new life in new country brings many uncertainties, but being along friendly people is very important for me and my family. I can feel at home here with this community. The chair represents us. Every day different people from our building, from our community, sit in those chairs. The yellow chair, the one different colored chair among the rest, convey that someone can be different, come from different country, and yet still be very welcome to the community. I come from different country and I want to be accepted into the community, and this community has accepted me for many, many years. This makes me feel safe and comfortable. In Europe, I also live in communities, but this community is a special community because it is like paradise what we have created with our space of living. I never had that where I grew up. Here, beauty surrounds us. It is gorgeous.
Oops, sorry. All right. So that was an excerpt from the first week. The second theme was neighborhood livability and sense of place. And so people were asked, what stands out when you think about your connection to the spaces and places of our neighborhood? Are there spaces and places that you cherish? What do they look like? What does the livability of our neighborhood look like or feel like to you? And what feelings convey your sense of place in this neighborhood? What emotions do you experience? I'm just going to go back one. So this is on the wall of the community center. There are a bunch of kayaks and other things in behind there. And this individual public art. I took this photograph because this is my son's artwork from when he was 3.5. We heard his voice earlier. I love walking by and seeing his art and remembering those sweet times. It is a reminder that we've been in this community for 25 years and makes me feel part of the community. And the funny thing is that when I was taking those photographs the other day to put in the slideshow, I walked by and I'd always sort of looked and thought, is that artwork still there? And I didn't see it, and then I looked and it's there, so it's still there. And it's just this funny little 3.5-year-old's artwork.
The boardwalk. I walk here every day, sometimes several times a day. A year and a half ago, my husband was scheduled for quadruple bypass surgery. For over 6 months, he was unable to do any exercise except for walking, and this was very difficult for him given how active he had been. Every single day for those 6 months, we walked along this boardwalk. The boardwalk is a very special place to me now. I am super grateful that my husband is still alive and grateful that we have this beautiful neighborhood to walk in.
False Creek. This photo shows the route that I'd take to get to False Creek Elementary School. I'd either walk or bike along the seawall, and I have some very early memories of biking down it with my parents in the morning. Naturally, this was very formative for me. I don't think I got it at the time, but retroactively, I think about how convenient that was. I never needed to wait for a bus, I never needed to be driven, there was never really any difficulty to get there. I think this photo kind of evokes that gratitude. Going forward, regardless of the school I attended, I'd always have some sort of route that took me either along or near the seawall. This was true up until I started going to UBC in 2020, although I could always just go a few blocks down on the walk home and get a beautiful view. That's something I've always really treasured. I sometimes get a little bit of melancholy looking back, as I don't take this route very much nowadays. There's a sense of not being able to go back to the way things were, I guess. But with time, the feeling ultimately gives way to happiness that I was ever able to take this route in the first place. It's one of the many benefits I can't imagine my family would ever have been able to afford without a place like this to live in.
I'm going to read out the write-up for this. Contemplation. Falls Creek South is renowned as a world-class model for integrated housing. People come from all over the world to recognize and analyze this model. I keep thinking, why would you want to dismantle that? It's such a beautiful model to recreate. I watched all of the City Hall meetings every single day, and I was one of the last speakers. There were only 2 people out of 170 that had anything good to say about the new economic plan. That proposal basically annihilated Falls Creek South. We get over 50,000 tourists a year coming here. One cannot tell where the private condominiums are relative to the affordable housing complexes. Economic division is dissolved by integrating both co-ops and strata developments with beautiful park spaces, gardens, water parks, and water features along the seawall. These alternative hubs of green space provide a relaxing reprieve from the concrete surroundings of the city.
Community store. I like the owner of the store. I like his stories and his jokes. My wife always stops by to buy $6.49 or Lotto Max lottery tickets. She has never won anything. I admire the owner. He is in the store every day, serving the community with basics.
So the third of the concepts was to celebrate and honor those that the social, whether it was connections with family or friends or members in the co-op. And people were to think about those important connections in the time that they'd lived at Creekview. Are there special relationships that you cherish and would like to honor? What do they look like and feel like? And what feelings convey your sense of connection or gratitude or honoring of these relationships? My fellow gardening member did a beautifully written tribute to all of us that love to dig in the dirt at all times, and it's just a beauty to read. Unfortunately, it's too long. She does acknowledge that most of us stay on the committee until our knees or backs cannot withstand such work, but it's really lovely. Here's one of the areas where there's a table there, and you can book that, and many. There's been weddings, there's all sorts of stuff that have taken place. This is a really beautiful relationship, talking about what happens in a co-op where you can have these unexpected friendships. They both live on the same floor, and her son has really taken to one of our members. And here she's captured him reading a book out by the fire pit. This member is on the social committee, and forever and ever, she does all the decorating. I think she plans the next decorating adventure as soon as one ends. And she kept thinking, I know I can have like a white tablecloth covered anniversary, and I want to have a garden party. And so this is her tribute to being able to do that. And
Chili out back. This was a lovely evening with friends that are also members of the co-op. We gathered together for chili in the backyard. We enjoyed a great meal and also got to watch our children play and connect with one another. It is amazing to watch our children grow up together and form such great connections at such a young age. I am grateful to have neighbors who are also friends with children that are the same age as my own. Growing up in a community is such a blessing, and I will always cherish these moments.
Bogdan. This photograph is to celebrate someone special to me. It is my way of expressing my sincere thanks for his friendship and for all the work he does for each of us individually and for Creekview Co-op as a whole. Although we only see Bogdan in this picture, I can see his whole family in it and the special friendship we have, and that I will always cherish. I am grateful for all the support and kindness they provided while I raised my daughter Chelsea, especially around the elementary school years and all those years I was working 12-hour night shifts. 13 years to be exact. I don't know how the heck I did it, but with the help of Bogdan and family, and of course you, Debra, and other people in the co-op, but most especially with Bogdan and his family. There were times when I would rush home from a 12-hour night shift. Somebody would be staying with Chelsea overnight, but when I got home, she was already to go to school. I would just walk in, get whatever she needed for school, and get on the bus and drop her off at school. Bogdan and Liliana were watching this happen, and they approached me one day and said, "Why do you have to do that every morning, Angie? Johnny and Chelsea go to the same school. Bring her down to the parking lot, and we will take her to school. You go to bed, and we will bring her back." I think this photograph celebrates Bogdan and the whole family. I owe a lot to these guys. He is a good friend, a good man, and a good family, and I thank them.
the final concept was strength in numbers. Together we are greater than the sum of our parts. The essence of our co-op housing is based on cooperation with others, and much of what is achieved here is only possible or is enhanced through member participation. What is possible when individuals act as a group, as a collective, is represented in the two phrases. We do have strength in numbers, and combined, our impact is greater than the sum of our individual contributions. Cooperation can include interdependence with others. It can enhance one's sense of security. It definitely requires participation and teamwork. And it can generate community spirit and feelings of connectedness. I'm reading what I wrote to them. When thinking of images to capture cooperation, one can think of the plants and animals as well. Bats, honeybees, ants, flocks of birds, even daddy longlegs, who apparently hook their legs together and puff themselves up so they present a united front to flying bats. All achieve great things by cooperating as collectives. Companion planting is all about planting purposely to enhance the growth of plants and often ward off pests, which is why we have marigolds and cosmos planted in the veggie and berry gardens. What does cooperation mean to you? And how has cooperating with others here at the co-op allowed you to experience the power of strength in numbers? In this, we were a leaky co-op, and the entire side of the building was removed in this time period. And one of the people on the gardening committee has captured this over time. You can see the trunk of my car there with plants in it, and I'm there by the roto where we had to drag them with a small, I forget what the name of the thing is, across the property. At the end, she talks about where we built up this together from the ruins of packed earth, glass shards, and abandoned hardware. And to this day, these many years later, we all still dig up pieces of metal and pieces of glass from all of the windows that were smashed in that yard. But it's all very beautiful, but yes, it's not good. Seven Sisters is just showing again the weakness of a tree at the top, but the rigidity and the strength at the root.
Be stronger together. My son Isaac and I came across several bees pollinating these flowers. The way the sun hit the flowers was so beautiful. We sat and watched them for several minutes. Bees are social animals and work together to help their colony survive. It made me think of all the co-op committees and members coming together for the sole purpose of having a great place to live. Co-op members work together, cooperate together, help each other, lean on each other, and support one another. I feel grateful to have such beautiful gardens around our co-op. These grounds allow me to appreciate the hard work of others. It also allows me to teach my son to respect their hard work. This allows me to teach my family what it is to be a part of a community that supports and works with each other to create a beautiful home for all of us to appreciate. I feel proud and honored to have been selected to be part of this community.
One of the people is also a painter. This, similarly to the photo you saw with the yellow chair and all the other chairs, is highlighting all of the elements of people working together to build one structure, and that, as quote, each of these elements differ in form, color, and spirit, yet they come together as one unified whole. Together, from all different cultures, creeds, and ages, we can build a better, more beautiful life on the planet. And here, again, individually we are one drop, but together we are an ocean. In this, the member talked about how his partner is unable to ride a bike on their own. And so I wanted him to read out his write-up because, of course, it was really quite funny talking about how much they argue about who pedals more. But nevertheless, that the tandem bike requires teamwork and cooperation, and that they are dependent on one another, having to work together. The people in the project decided they were going to have a group photo, and so this is a photograph that's showing people. There was a poster that went up inviting people down, and this is the co-op photo. I made a decision that I needed to go see a documentary on Mr. Dressup, and so I am not in the photo, and I didn't know that, of course, it was going to stream almost immediately, so it's like, what? So I was watching Mr. Dressup, the history of Mr. Dressup, while this photo was taken.
Co-op group photo. This event was amazing because it was the first time in 25 years of our living in the co-op that there was a stage group photograph. It brought a lot of people together to participate. It touched me very much. You do realize that you live in a building where you know everybody, and if you need eggs, onion, or milk, that you can go to your neighbor. I have a few friends who live downtown, and they do not know their neighbors. Here at our co-op, I feel very secure, and I really feel that we are a community here. I love living here and cannot imagine to live in another building where neighbors do not know and help each other. This picture tells everything of co-op housing. Totally self-governed and affordable housing, creating a safe community for families and individuals.
We had a comment book at the photo exhibit, and so I just wanted to show you a couple of the really heartwarming, thought-provoking work. Spoke with one resident of the building who shared, "You're never alone." What an incredible gift to have living in a rapidly commodifying city. What a beautiful sentiment to share through words and photography. And one of the members, I felt a bit emotional looking at all these photos of our beautiful community. So many of them resonate and have the same impact to my heart as they do to yours. And someone who was a visitor, this is truly an amazing combined story of the nurturing aspects of co-ops and the community that they create. And finally, probably my favorite, a member, wonderful show. It feels like a love letter to our home. Thank you so much. So as an epilogue, there's much going on, and I certainly don't have the time, nor will I go into it, but some exciting things to think about that might be applicable is that there definitely is a resurgence of co-ops. They absolutely kind of disappeared for a couple of decades at least. Here is an op-ed piece that was built, but importantly is this is a 2024, Toronto being one step closer to the largest affordable housing project in decades, and talking about co-ops making a comeback. And there were many articles then. This is from the Georgia Strait, Co-ops Can Help Our Housing Crisis. So one after another was the attention. We need to look here. As far as the False Creek South Neighbourhood Association, I went to a town hall just a couple of weeks ago, and you can see up there, there's one of the drop-down is called Housing Trust. One of the initiatives they're working on is to have the area declared a land trust, and so all development would be conducted through the land trust in consultation and led by the neighborhood itself. So that's something. Apparently, Hogan's Alley has a successful land trust right now. The ABC majority and city council commissioned a new study that has been taking place. They've done a lot of things like testing of the soil. I think they're probably going, could we really build 50-story high-rises on this reclaimed water, or land that was water and mudflats? So I don't know. We don't know. Our co-op itself is on a holdover lease, which means that we have very stringent conditions that have been imposed by the city about raising our housing charges every year. And we're also adjacent to the Broadway plan, which has had massive, as we know, dislocation. It's so sad to watch what has happened. And we're a very, very, very heavily rental-based, low-rise living neighborhood. Will never be the same. This week, the newsletter for False Creek South, which is called Between the Bridges, announced that False Creek Co-op, which is just down the seawall from me, opened their wait list, and they received over 750 applications in a couple of days. So the desire is there, and the desire for affordable housing is there, and so hopefully something good will happen.
When my husband and I got pregnant, we applied to housing co-ops as it was the only way we could afford to stay in Vancouver. We were very fortunate to get into Creekview and were overwhelmed with the generosity and support of our neighbors after I was diagnosed with cancer 5 years ago. We are fortunate to have been able to stay in Vancouver and receive the necessary medical care. The photovoice exhibition is a way for me to pay it forward to a community life that is much needed in Vancouver.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see the troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name.
Thank you.
so much, Deborah, for this really heartwarming, I think, presentation. We have time for a few questions, if anybody has questions for Deborah. I'll break it. Oh, yeah, go for it. Oh, I wait a minute.
Sorry, I'm going to grab the mic and then cough into it. Thank you so much, Deborah. That was, it was a really moving and inspiring presentation, and also thinking about the way that people's sense of insecurity, not knowing what's going to happen, and how you can channel that into something really positive. I want to go back to the tandem bicycle.
To the tandem
bicycle? To the tandem bicycle,
yes.
Not specifically, but the idea that cooperation and cooperatives, cooperation in general, there's a lot of tension, and that getting along is challenging. And I wonder if that came out in any of the other images, because I know we didn't get to see all of them.
No, it didn't actually. Yes, and for sure that because they're a married couple, it came through more, and his, even the quote about buying lottery tickets but never winning, there were little jabs that would come through. But no, it didn't. And yeah, I can certainly tell you from living there all these years that is a very real side. And my project does not go into that side of what it means to live with other people. It's like a small town, as we all know, where sometimes you really love that person, and the next time you're talking dirt with them and about them in the laundry room, right? And so I certainly have witnessed what is also required in living with others. And so, yes, but no, it didn't come through. They were all very, much more complimentary. Part of it may be because of the questions that they had to photograph. Yeah, so if I had said, how hard has it been to live here, we might have had... how is it to, have you stopped being on a committee? Then we might have had different responses.
That was great. I feel like I have an inside track on the co-op because of all the years you stayed over with me on your Thursday nights to teach the next day, and we talked a lot about it. And one of the things I guess I never realized was how I thought it was much bigger than the picture showed in terms of the number of people. And so many people talked about raising their whole families there, like staying so long. I guess I had imagined more turnover. When I lived in Vancouver over 14 years, I think I was in 11 apartments, and always the search for the better apartment and the cheaper rate. And I guess I wondered if you had any information just about how many people do live in the co-op, and do they stay for decades like yourself?
Yes, look, decades like myself. Yes, that was one of the reasons I really wanted to do the study. I thought that it was important to establish that it was a neighborhood and that people had raised their children here. We have many members who are original members. I mean, I came in, it was built in 1985, and I came in 1995, but we have many that are original members, and they've raised their children, and they've moved, and now they've been downsized into one bedrooms. And one of the initiatives the False Creek South Neighborhood Association has very, very seriously, I saw the plans when I was at the town hall, is I forget the proper name, but it's a facility that will go all the way from literally babies to seniors, so people can also age in place in the neighborhood, and so that they could move out of the co-op and allow for, maybe a family instead of a couple to be in those units, but stay in the neighborhood and stay because it's the neighborhood often, not so much that one unit. So there's really real initiatives. So there's many people, and that's really what I wanted to highlight, was that we have, especially Vancouver always is unaffordable, but it got incredibly unaffordable, and then nobody moved. And rents are so out of reach. And part of me, I feel at times quite guilty because I watch, my daughter left Vancouver because she couldn't afford to live there, for example. So I watch the youth, and you just wish that they could stay in the city, but they can't. So yeah, that was, as I say, that was one of the reasons, and there's a lot of continuity in membership in all the co-ops. And so those people that are on False Creek South Neighborhood Association will have started there way back when they first moved there. And so they'll have been fighting this fight for decades.
I think it was particularly touching to hear so many people talk about how they survived illness together, the cancers and the heart attack and so on. I know you mentioned, not in this presentation, that there was also a facility for quadriplegics that was part of your group. And I just think in a time when the city and the country and the world is so sick, the idea of taking care of each other is incredible and hopeful. So thank you.
Yeah. The individual you saw there, Bogdan, is a recently retired. He was he looked after the building and also lives here. But he was a phenomenally generous person, and he would cook and take meals to people that were there. We had a few people who were having some real health and addiction issues, and he would bring food every day and try and make it that they ate. And so he had a whole circuit, and it would rotate as individuals moved or passed away. And so just that sense of we need to know and take care of the members that are there. Yeah, thanks.
That was a great presentation, Deborah. I loved it. I just wonder, is there any moments or conversations while doing this study that are like a big highlight for you? Like, did anyone approach you, like, and just like talk to you about the project and how it meant to them, like specifically?
Yeah, that's why I tried to, the little comment book was where I saw that. It really, people talked about tearing up, even if they didn't know who the people were or what the photos. So a lot of individuals who lived in other co-ops or other strata in False Creek were really quite touched. And so it went into that, which is what I hope for, is that you would really understand. And that's why I said the logic-based appeals. You know, obviously you should have affordable housing. We know that that should be the case. And that doesn't mean you're going to influence real estate planning departments in City Hall who are just out to make a lot of money. So yeah, it was really lovely to be able to do it. People in the project, once it ended, I mean, it took a long time after, but when we officially stopped meeting each week, and then they said they were sad to see it end because they liked getting together and they liked to talk and share the photos, and so that was heartwarming too. But I've tried to make sure I just audio recorded them. Some of them more reluctantly than others. And so even that, they were, as soon as I was like, I'm going to be presenting, I need to audio record your, so we'd sit and do you want to do another take? Could you pause? So that was pretty sweet as well.
That's great, thank you.
This was great. I feel like I want to live in a co-op. And my question is, you've lived there so long, you met so many different people. During the study, did you get to know anything you didn't before you started the study, or something that came up that you probably weren't aware of before?
That's a good question. Did I learn something? I don't know if I learned something as much as I was reinforced with what I sensed. I think that, you know, like I remember my daughter who grew up there feeling that she was safe because although the places are so small, but people are right there. Like if anything's to happen, if you even yelled, people are going to hear you. So there was always this sense, and they know you, which is what when one of the members was talking about, you know, I know people downtown and they don't know their neighbors. Well, the whole idea here is, unfortunately, everybody knows probably too much about each other. And so in that sense, it is a great sense of security. And so that, I think, and you know, it's a contradictory experience for sure, because you have to cooperate with others. But it was just really lovely to see the way that they visualized and the way that they story told about what it meant to be there. And that they're, you know, I mean, I would say, yes, they do embody the community ethos. So it was nice to have that reinforced.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. It was great. You may not be able to answer my question because you weren't there right at the beginning, but I'm wondering if back in 1985, to what extent was the construction of that building subsidized? And if, whether or not you can answer that, do you think in 2026, with the incredible cost of land and the outrageous cost of construction, whether something like this could still happen?
Well, I mean, I did have slides about a new initiative that the federal government has put in place, and I indeed have it somewhere here. Canada's National Housing Strategy that was launched in 2017, and it became an act in 2019. The amounts that are there differ depending where I look. Originally, it was $40 billion strategy for grants and loans to construct new co-op houses and continued rent geared to income subsidy funding. But I've seen it as high as $100 billion. So I don't know. I didn't have enough time to go, why are these numbers so radically different from one another? So that's the National Housing Strategy Act. And what those co-ops were, as I mentioned, those are federal grants that ended out being part of the equation for building at that time. So maybe that can be something then now that could be put into place or utilized, know that it exists, and then advocate for it.
I love the lecture you did. I do like the way that photographs are very personal, and I think the way that people took them, you know, it's through the way they see the community, and that's really relevant. My question for you is, how do you think that community benefits people's mental health in a city that can be so widespread and large and feel lonely for so many people?
Oh, that's a great question, Carrie. I think that's why co-ops are really helpful in the context of, if we were to say, I don't think anybody there could ever afford a home. So that's not really the situation. But if you compare it to then rental, where you may not know ever, and the enhanced vulnerability of that, I think that's what came through in the study a lot, was it provided a sanctuary. Part of it is that obviously False Creek and Granville Island are beautiful, so they are kind of a little oasis in a really intense. There is so much building. If I could have, for example, I was going to show you the new Senok building on the Senok lands, which is just out my kitchen window. So if I look through the bridge. But they've been doing work on the Granville Street Bridge now for, I don't know, it's hard to know because the noise is so loud and it seems forever. But the latest incarnation is at least a year. And that's sandblasting cement every day. They have a special allowance for how long they can do it. And they can start very early in the morning and go till 11 at night. So you walk out, and if you did, I know it exceeds the whatever the loudness is for people to be safe. So there's those parts. But apart from that, I think part of the setting and then the cooperative nature of the housing helps to give people a sense of a special place and that they have a community that they can draw from.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you again. If we can offer Debra Pentecost one more round of applause. And thank you to all for coming today. I'm just going to take a moment to plug our next presentation. The final one for the 2025-2026 Colloquium Series will be offered by Professor Justin McGrail, Chair of the Visual Arts Program here at VIU.
It will be graffiti as experience inside versus outside viewing. There's more information available on the Colloquium website, as well as on some of the documents that you'll see out in the lobby, where you can also go and get some tea, coffee, and cupcakes, and hopefully keep going with the conversation. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll hope to see you on March 27th here at this theater at 10 a.m. Thanks again.